to the next session, which is our panel of Are Influencers the Future of Game Marketing? However, I did promise a little extra things. I mean, you might not, think that's a promise of something special, but it's going to be imparting information about our sponsors. And the main sponsor for this particular track is Enthusiast Gaming. I've told you all about them before, so I'm not going to go that, but I just wanted to mention our platinum sponsors. I don't think I really need to explain Facebook as to what they're about. Zolo, a lot of you may not know, but is one of the other platinum sponsors. And the great thing they can do is accelerate video game commerce globally. So what that basically means, you can help you to market, sell, connect, and optimize your game with one platform. So there's a little bit of extra information about one of our major sponsors, platinum sponsors. Our other sponsors, Ad Colony, 10 Square Game, Ad Colony, 10 Square Games, Catapult, Joypack, Number 8, and Scooty Score. I will try and find something about the others there. But more importantly, we're now moving into our next panel, and with Sophia Aubrey Drake, who's a developer, evangelist, and big indie pitch manager. I've got down here as queen of all things indie. I can't see, where's your tiara and your crown? Queen of all things indie. She's also a global speaker and lifelong gamer with fanatical love of things Nintendo and Japan. Konnichiwa.
I am. Konnichiwa.
I did actually meant to have my Mario cap on, so I've got the Mario ready for him. It's a little bit, he's getting a bit old, Mario. I was going to have my Mario cap on for you. So much so that she's written a thesis on one and lived in the other. But the great thing about having Sophia here is that I don't have to introduce all the other panelists. That's up to Sophia.
It is. That's my job. Thank you, David, though.
Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. No, thank you, David, for a lovely introduction. I've been watching the track. It's lovely to have such positive energy in the track. I try and bring some of that when I'm moderating as well. But, it's nice for me to be on the, I say moderating, that's what I'm moderating this panel. But when I'm hosting the tracks, I try and bring some energy. And I'm sure a lot of you in the audience will have seen me throughout the week hosting tracks and running big indie pitches. And I won't bore you too long with my introduction, but as David says, I work for Steel Media, Pocket Gamer, right here alongside at some other places, and I basically present and host the big indie pitch tracks here, do a bit of writing, and mainly work with independent developers and have done for years. But we're here today to talk about Are Influencers the Future of Game Marketing, which is a really interesting topic and one that I get asked an awful lot by indie developers, regularly, in fact. So at this point, I'm going to start to bring in the screens of all my panelists, because I'm sure you're thinking, wait a minute, they haven't got screens on or anything like that. But here they come, just like magic. So yes, we've got Mika, Alwin, Daniel, Philip. I think Amy might be joining us shortly. But in the meantime, obviously we'll get Amy to do an introduction when she joins. But I know we're running a little behind schedule. Here's Amy, I believe. And I know we're running a little bit behind schedule, but we'll still get the full time for the panel, so don't worry about that. And I know we've got a range of questions that we've discussed and everything, but I think, it would be wrong not to start with introductions. So I'm going to go just in the order that I've got you in my screens, which is basically, I think, the order that you were promoted up to the panelist stage. So Mika, let's start with you.
Cool, thanks. Always happy to be promoted as a first one, right? So, my name is Mika. I'm CEO of ENCE Esports, and this is probably my 15th presentation of panel with Pocket Gamer guys. So always great to be back. I come with a little bit different background to this panel, as I'm actually running an esports organization. So ENCE has we represent a bunch of different games, including Counter-Strike, PUBG, StarCraft 2, stuff like that. Counter-Strike is our kind of bread and butter, where our team is one of the best in the world. And actually our PUBG team they spent about 12 weeks in Korea. They just got back 2 weeks ago from the bubble. So they were the biggest PUBG tournament ever organized so far, with a total prize pool of around like whatever 6-7 million. And I think we were number 14 in the world.
Oh, I think we'll wait for Mika to come back. I'm sure we'll get Mika back imminently. But in the meantime, whilst Mika's coming back into the flow. Oh, wait a minute. Well, anyway, what we'll do is we can come back to Mika in a minute, because we've got quite a big panel here, which is amazing. Oh, Mika, you're back. Brilliant.
So sorry, I dropped there for a second, but
it's all right.
Probably my internet. So just the last word. So yeah, so my team basically has a bunch of influencers who are actually professional gamers. So we work with different brands like Red Bull to leverage that power basically that these guys have. At the end of the day, their main focus is to be professional gamers, right? That's important.
Fantastic, and you're making me jealous going on about travel. But Alwin, introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. I guess I came from both sides of the things, gaming and now into esports. However, my focus area is more on mobile, first of all, and then second of all, it's primarily focused in Asia. So I work with a ton of different influencers, large and small. And now currently I'm the head of BD in CAPSL, and our product is called Bash, as you can see, whoops, this side.
I do that as well. It's all flipped.
Yeah. And the key to this platform is helping like micro influencers grow. So we're kind of like a tournament platform. So people come in and they compete on any mobile games that they want. But the key is that these people are also streaming their tournaments, gaining traction with their fans, and then growing their follower base. So one of the best cases, like 6 months ago, a person that signed up with us, she grew her fan base like 3 times in 6 months by working with us on Bash. So yeah.
Fantastic. And Daniel, over to you next. Oh, you're on mute. The perils of Zoom.
I had barking dogs, I do apologize.
It's fine.
So hey everyone, yes, my name's Dan, Director of Gaming Partnerships at WeQ. So a bit about WeQ. I guess we're a creative influencer agency based out of Berlin, serving global clients. And that's everything from publishers across console, mobile, PC, right through to your gaming brands and non-endemics. And then for a little bit about me in terms of my background. So I started in the gaming industry back in 2016 with the Insomnia Gaming Festival team. So I've covered pretty much every single type of client and every type of every area of the gaming industry at this point, whether it be sort of esports, digital advertisement, marketing, influencer, etc. So yeah, excited to be here.
Fantastic, excited to have you. And Philip?
I'll try and get myself off mute as well. Hello, everybody. My name's Philip. I'm the CEO of Cheesecake Digital. My background is 20 years in esports predominantly, but also crossing over into the traditional industry. So I've worked publisher side for EA Sports, Square Enix, and Disney Interactive Studios. Cheesecake as an agency focuses on strategy and consultancy about the industry and esports. So we often get inquiries as to who are the top talents in different markets when it comes to influencers and streamers. And we currently, our focus is the Middle East, which is where I'm based. And we release quarterly reports looking at top streamers, watch time, and various other metrics for the streamers across different platforms in the Middle East.
Fantastic. And next up is Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy. I am CEO of Mattel 163. So this is, we represent the gaming side of this panel. We have a game out there called Uno, which a lot of you have played. It's the classic card game. So we are tapping into the casual side of esports in terms of tournaments. And we are actively engaging influencers to work with us on our game. So have a different perspective on this topic from the game IP point of view.
Fantastic. And I know we've got Elena here, but I don't know if there is someone on the other end. So Let's see if Elena joins. But in the meantime, given that we've got, oh, well, there we go. I suppose Elena will join if possible. But I want to get into it because we've got a lot of panelists today. We've got a lot of experience to share. And, you know, hopefully we can get through quite a number of questions. So let's start with something simple. And I think it's something that can create the basis of, you know, a lot of the topics that we're about to talk about, which is quite simply, how would you define an influencer today? Because I think there's a lot of different definitions and there's obviously different sizes and different types of influencers. So simply put, how would you define an influencer today? And I'm going to do this randomly so that we don't stick to the same order. So let's start with you, Philip. How would you define an influencer today?
It's a great and interesting starting question because yes, lots of people will have different views on this, whether you look at people who have a huge audience, people who have a small audience but have the power to actually, as we say, influence and encourage people to make decisions or take actions. And I guess for us, in terms of the way that we look at the space and the conversations that we have with brands, it's about who can actually help me achieve my objective. And that objective may be awareness, it may be, you know, conversions. It's about, okay, who has an audience that they have a direct relationship with and can encourage to take a certain type of action.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that? Please feel free to jump in.
Yeah,
Normally
sure,
I'd come
absolutely.
to all of you, but obviously once we get to a sort of agreed upon definition, it might be that we can move on forward.
No.
But yeah, Dan, you've got something to add.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think Philip makes a great point there. I think, you know, working backwards from the goal that's set is always the way to sort of identify, you know, how to sort of work for that process, find the right content creators, influencers, depending on what they're labeled. But for me, I think it's just, you know, I think anybody can be an influencer. And essentially all it is somebody that has the power to affect somebody else's like purchasing habits or buying decisions potentially. And the reason they have that power is because of their sort of knowledge or relationship with a given personal audience. So I actually think that the term influence is actually usually built around maybe a specific niche or common interest. And obviously in this case, it's video games.
Fantastic. And anyone else, or have we got we at a basis now? Alwin, I think you've just come off mute. That's always a good sign someone wants to say something.
Yeah, I guess I just want to add to, you know, the size of like your following does not matter at all.
Yeah.
You know, like ourselves, we work with, you know, really small micro influencers, right? And that's like a few thousand. And, you know, micro influencer here in Asia to micro influencer in the States could be very, very different numbers. So like we call micro when they're like still below 100K followers. But if you have 100K followers in North America, you're no longer micro, right? So I think looking at the number doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's more like your fit to the particular brand or your topic.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And, you know, without spinning it off too much, I think that goes down the line of, you know, just like we see in genre of video games as well, is, you know, like a horror game or a visual novel, it might not potentially do the numbers that something, you know, like a massive, you know, Call of Duty might do. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it's not massively successful as a genre and hugely important with an engaged audience. So I think that's a great point. Well, I think unless, you know, Amy or Mika have anything to add to that, I think we've got sort of a great basis there to continue the conversation. But in the spirit of, you know, giving everyone a chance, I'm going to come to you first, Mika, and then on to you, Amy, is, you know, keeping on that topic, you know, in what ways do you think influencer marketing differs from traditional marketing? I know in your case, Mika, you obviously have an esports team, but which is, you know, you're delivering in a lot of ways that influencer marketing to people who want you to. And so in your experience, how would you say that what you and your teams do differs from traditional marketing? In what way is it maybe more impactful?
Yeah, there's definitely similarities if I approach this from the perspective of a let's say product placement, for example, right? Like Red Bull is one of our partners, and they are just integrated across everything we do. This is probably one of the only streams we ever do without having a Red Bull can somewhere on my background. No, there's so, but it's actually like in the States after a few years of working with them, it's very organic, right? We shoot a lot of content. with our players in the office in this practice. This is Counter-Strike practice room, actually, by the way. So there's a Red Bull cooler here, there's a canning over there, etc. So there's a lot of similarities from the product placement perspective. However, taking another very kind of easy to understand kind of example would be, let's say, Logitech. Logitech is our partner as well in terms of gaming gear, like headsets, keyboards, mice. Our players influence a lot of young people who want to get better on Counter-Strike or PUBG. Simple idea, them playing with the best gear available happens to be Logitech. You see also that gear across the content we do. Obviously, we do different activations as well, but there's this natural connection of, hey, this guy is one of the best players in the world on Counter-Strike. I wanna be as good as he is, so I need this gear. And there are this kind of product placement similarities as well, but there's obviously a very clear angle of a performance improvement there in that case as well. This is easy, like endemic partners are like, those are easy to understand. Now, if we work with, let's say, non-endemic, even an energy drink, you need to be much more kind of, creative in a process of actually running different schemes for the brand.
Yeah, and then before I open it up to everyone else, I'd like to come to Amy. And obviously, we'll apologise for any doorbells that you hear. We can't help that, a bit like dogs in Dan's case. But yeah, Amy, I was going to ask you, you obviously work with traditional marketing and influencer marketing. What would you say the key differences are from your side when you reach out to them?
Yeah. Well, so from two perspectives, for us as the gaming brand, we use influencers to help us expand the brand. So compared to performance marketing, whereas it's very extremely targeted, very precise. I think some of the panelists mentioned that influencer marketing has a very targeted subset of audience. However, we find that in our dealings with certain influencers, if they don't have a direct affinity with our brand, let's say our game Uno, then it becomes a hard sell. So then the face of the influencer together with our brand doesn't really help promote and expand our game, which is what we're looking for. So my perspective on this is, this compared to traditional marketing, if there is a influencer who is deeply passionate about your brand, like a lot of these Fortnite players out there, the teams who are very passionate about the game that they're playing, it's a different story. You have an audience that follows you, they enjoy watching your play. But if it's a directly sponsored influencer type of deal, and the influencer, him or herself, does not really engage with your brand, then it becomes a very hard sell, kind of like traditional marketing. So my perspective on influencers is actually slightly negative at this point in our brand campaigns, and I would love to learn more from my fellow panelists today.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's open it up to everyone else. Philip, Alwin, and Dan. Do any of you have anything to add on this when looking at the differences between influencer marketing and traditional marketing, and maybe what people should consider? Also, before someone jumps in, I want to apologize again for my doorbell. It's a very annoying one. I only commented the other day. I should change it to like the Mario Brothers theme or something. But yeah, does anyone want to add anything?
I think one comment I would make would be, if we take that line of targeting and we say traditional marketing, there are certain aspects of traditional marketing that you can target. If we look at digital marketing, again, there are certain aspects that we can target. If we're looking at a Facebook campaign, okay, there's tools there that Facebook provides, whether it's location, whether it's gender, whether it's language, interests, all those sorts of things. One of the challenges when it's working with influencers is, okay, I can see you as an influencer potentially from a specific country, but I don't necessarily have the visibility of where your audience is from and whether that matches with the requirements of a particular campaign. Now, if you're launching a game, it may be that, okay, your game servers, depending on how you set things up, are in a specific location, and therefore you're starting with 4 key markets, and therefore you're looking for talent to support that. Now, if you can't get the data around the audience and the viewership and the social followings of some of those influencers, then you potentially undertake a campaign that doesn't support your end objective, because there's a disconnect there between who you can access as an influencer and who you can access as a relevant audience. And I think that's one of the challenges as well when it comes to influencer campaigns, is when you look at who to use and why to use them, that data piece is still something that there's a lack of visibility around it. And I think that also potentially goes to Amy's points, the extension of, not is it just about the influencer and their connection to the brands, it's whether the audience of the influencer is relevant and can connect with the brand.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point as well, because, like you say, in many ways, it's not just about looking at the influencer and what Alwin said before, at the pure numbers. In many ways, I suppose there is a little bit more onus on the people seeking influencers to actually put a bit more research into who they're connecting with and whether this will work, in comparison maybe to traditional marketing, where it's set up in a certain way to have a meeting with certain deliverables. Moving on though to the next question, and I'll probably come to you, Dan, next, to try and keep the flow going and keep everyone's voices in, is how important do you think it is to be considering influencers right from the very start, when creating a game, or if people are reaching out to developers, how important is it to the influencer and to the developer or publisher, and that whole relationship, that you start thinking about this fairly early on if you want to leverage influencer marketing properly?
Yeah, no, I think it's become increasingly important to factor this in as a sort of tentpole in your traditional marketing mix, to be honest with you. I think for a lot of publishers and brands out there, if it isn't a part of the conversations very early on, then you're probably missing a huge opportunity that other people are taking advantage of. And I think that in order to establish the sort of the best results from initiating those conversations early, it gives you sort of the best opportunity to sort of look at it quite holistically and say, okay, well, look, we have this specific game. Here's sort of the launch cycle. Maybe there's other aspects to the process that are happening there. And actually, you can really start to identify the points of where you can plug influencers into that process to gain the best results. So, and on the flip side to that as well, when you look at the sort of the more traditional marketing models, where they might fall in line to help support that as well. So I think that it's got to a place where it's actually become a very, like I say, a very staple pillar to any sort of traditional marketing mix, but also to the point where now we're looking at it, and it's not just sort of influencer marketing in isolation. It's actually a really holistic thing that speaks to many different areas of your entire marketing journey for a launch or a game that's happening.
Yeah, I want to touch upon the difference between larger and smaller and how important it is with starting early in a moment. So I'll come to you, Alwin. But before I do that, because I think it's relevant, Mika, how important is it for you and your teams that companies open those conversations earlier if they want to work with you guys? Is it important, or is it something where it is important?
It is. So I guess kind of like I joined ENCE as a CEO and shareholder like 2.5 years ago, right? Like that was this market was still very much driven by the fact that you really have sponsors as an esports team. Sponsors like the Logitech or Red Bull, they give you a bunch of money and then a bunch of energy drinks, and then obviously they expect you to tweet about them, etc., etc., etc. Nowadays, completely different. I think the first question we always ask when we work with when we discuss with a new potential partner is that what are you actually like reaching for? What is your expectation? We try to build KPIs, right? We work with food delivery app Vault. Obviously, it's really performance driven. We need to drive the new registered users for the app every month. Now, then we work with telecom operator, which is a lot more around branding and then them kind of positioning them as a gamer friendly telecom operator. and also selling gaming gear and subscriptions, whatever. But I think, the best cases we work recently is that something that we can actually plan these campaigns together, right? That we can be, involved into the process of how can you leverage our gamers, right? We recently did a shorter term project with a vegan food where basically this brand launched the product into the Finnish market by trying to target young male from say 21 to 29, right? That was their core target. This is how they wanted to make sure that this audience kind of approves, accepts the product, and then kind of leverage later. So, and our core audience is 18 to 34 year of male, which is probably 80% of our audience, right? So us being able to kind of together plan with them a little bit like an agency actually, and then we actually would do a lot of content for them. We used our streamers, etc. The results were a lot better than if we would have just, okay, you come in later, things are working on, and you try to do something, integrate something on some of your streams. You can still do that, right? But it easily feels fake. And this, what Amy mentioned as well, being passionate about products, you need to be 100% authentic. We've been, brands have been reaching out to us that we've said no because we don't find a common passion in the product. We don't think it's genuine to market or promote their products if we feel that our audience will kind of, they don't believe the storyline, right? And we shouldn't do that because then it's actually gonna impact negatively our own brand as well.
Yeah, and Alwin, I wanted to ask you, because obviously, well, not obviously, that's the point. I want to touch on, your work with micro influencers, and do you feel like this differs depending on the size of the influencer and whether they're associated with an agency? And I know that, like other members of the panel, like Philip and maybe even Amy, from a point of view as the person reaching out to influencers, might have an opinion on this. But if I start with you, Alwin, do you think that there is a difference in the way that you should approach not just starting the conversations, but working with micro influencers compared to bigger influencers?
Sure. So I think it all, I think, Mika kind of also mentioned this already. Like the core to this is your strategy. So what are you actually looking to achieve, right? Pretty much what Mika just said. And if you are, for example, I can give two examples, I guess. So one is like a really big publisher trying to launch a huge game, right? And they want everyone to download their game, and they know that they will lose maybe 70-80% of the players because the game is a very hardcore game, right? And most people who just come in from having a celebrity as their influencer, right? They drive millions and millions of installs, but 90% of those or 95% of those installs are going to be gone, right? And they know that, right? That's fine, right? What they're looking to do though with that is to basically push them up the charts, right? And once they're up in the charts, then the actual, minnows and whales, you call it, right? They would come in, right? And because they see, oh, this game is high in the chart, well, it must be good, right? And then they come in, they invest their time, and over a longer run, right? They kind of continue to hype the game in the long run with targeted micro influences of their specific cohort, right? So, I targeted 4 or 5 influencers who are, really core strategy game players. They've been streaming content of strategy games. And these guys, I signed a longer contract with them, but they're cheaper, right? Because, it's a 4 or 5 month period campaign. Whereas for the particular a celebrity, I'd be going bang, right? Before the game, even before, here in Asia, it's like even before your game launches, you start pushing marketing if you have the cash, right? And you have like a celebrity and they come in and promote your game months before the game is launched. And so when the game is launched, it's up in the charts, and then you kind of continue that campaign with your targeted influencers, right? And that's kind of how the big players do it, I'd say, right? On the other hand, if you're like if you don't have that kind of budget to do that, right? And I would recommend that you actually spend time either with an agency or spend time yourself to find the specific influencers that are in that cohort, right? And definitely working with multiple different micro influencers of your specific cohort would give a much better result than going for someone who's really popular. And let's just say you spend the same amount of money with 5 different micro influencers, extending your campaign to 5 months instead of using one big influencer for just 1 month. And ultimately that would hurt your game's performance as well, right? So it depends on what style of game you are and what you're trying to achieve. You have a lot of confidence in the retention and monetization of your game, then I think it's recommended that you go with a big influencer and then smaller influencers, right? But if you're like, oh, I'm just still testing things out, I don't know, go with micro influencers of your cohort, build up that cohort, that niche in your title, right? Build up that confidence in your own product, and then you can think about going bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and Amy, is that what you find when working with influencers as well? Do you have a different strategy for larger versus micro influencers?
Actually, I want to address Alvin's point in this, that for smaller gaming studios, I honestly don't think they have the cash to burn to try out influencers, because it's a one-shot thing. Influencers, we find for the most part, they don't really guarantee you results. So it's more about the impressions and the branding part of the game. And I find a lot of the gaming influencers specifically are only suitable for the hardcore games. So there's a lack of market for more casual influencers that might be suitable for a casual game like ours. It's a very, very light. If you want to call it esports, you can call it casual esports, but it's a very light touch competitive game. So for us, we do have a rather significant budget going towards influencer marketing, but micro versus a large influencer. Actually, these days I'm leaning towards using a well-known celebrity. I'm paying, high 6 figures to 7 figures, and some of these top gaming influencers are charging in that range. And why don't I just go with a name that everyone knows, a household name, rather than a YouTuber who may or may not touch the audience that I want? So just from our experience, I find the micro influencers sometimes are not very professional in the way they represent your brand. So that's where we're gearing towards more of the larger ones who are used to repping brands, and even more so with celebrities, with agents who can manage the content professionally.
And I'm going to come back in a moment to the bit about, how it's like a one shot and there's no guarantees, unlike traditional marketing. But before that, I wanted to come to you, Philip, to just address the notion of, we talk about influencers, but this drastically differs from region to region. And you do a lot of research on differences in regions. And obviously you especially look at influencers in the Middle East. What would you say to people in the audience who are looking at influencers, but maybe haven't thought about regional differences and how, as Alwin touched on at the start, someone who's small in America or let's say China or Japan might actually have a massive reach in somewhere, like parts of the Middle East or Africa?
I think it's certainly a key consideration, and you need to look at it from the perspective of understanding what's actually happening in that local market. So, if we take an example here in the Middle East and our most recent reports, what was, I guess, the biggest takeaway and the biggest surprise is that, okay, and I guess it goes to the micro versus a large size influencers, but the top 8 regional streamers on Facebook Gaming had more watch time than the majority of streamers on Twitch, YouTube, and No Live combined. Okay, so Facebook Gaming then is absolutely one way to reach a certain type of audience here in the Middle East, again, depending on game preferences and things like that. But the key point then is to say, yes, there will be regional differences. There are different streaming platforms in Asia versus the Middle East versus the US. There are different social media platforms. There are different tools that people use, and it's ensuring that you take a look at what is regionally relevant and how those influencers and content creators sit within the context of that, not just doing a general comparison of, okay, they're at 100,000 great, that's a good number. I'm going to go with one. You need to spend that time thinking about what actually is relevant in each particular market. And I think just to go back to the previous point, if I can,
of course,
Daniel made a comment about the life cycle piece, and Mika in terms of trying to get involved in the overall strategy. I think there is an opportunity there to look at it from that perspective and say, it's not necessarily just about the launch of a game. That's currently where a lot of people focus. But actually, if you're doing betas and you're doing development work before that launch point, there's still an opportunity to get influencers involved, either to help shape the game or to get buy-in from their particular audiences. Is that a specific campaign that's crafted with an influencer that is benefits for their particular key audience, so that you can get buy-in before the game launch? And I think that's as part of the overall life cycle of development is also a key consideration for developers and publishers.
Yeah, and I'm going to come to you, Dan, with the next question, because obviously Philip mentioned you, so I'm using that as my inroad. But we've touched upon, and I think Mika will have something to say about this. I'm sure everyone will. But we've talked about that fact that when working with influencers, it's obviously very different to traditional marketing in the sense of you have no sort of direct control or direct, there's no guarantees necessarily or anything like that, especially if you're working with more micro influencers. I mean, do you see that as a problem for companies when using influencers with marketing, or is that potentially what makes influencers so great, is that they're real people and can create a real connection with their audience?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think for some brands, there's obviously right for concern. They're trying to protect their brand, their identity, and they want some control over that. But I actually think that the industry as a whole has done a really good job and is continuously trying to improve how we manage sort of both sides of this.
Yeah.
I think, like, on the one hand, obviously control is very useful in the sense that we don't want an influencer going completely rogue with something that you're trying to achieve an activation or a campaign. But on the flip to that, obviously the message to their respective audience or community needs to obviously maintain authentic and in line what that community is trying or always used to experiencing when they go and watch that specific influencer or their content. So I mean, the content creators ultimately know best how their communities are going to engage and what's going to service them best in terms of they like to see this kind of content. I can bring a brand into the space here quite naturally. And ultimately, I think that's what then yields the best results. And it's something that here at WeQ, the conversation we have very regularly quite early on is making sure that, we're quite open in the sense of how much control is this a very sort of like strict ad read where we know that if that's the case, then we're building a campaign that's probably going to be more integration based, 60 to 90 seconds. It's very kind of like transactional in nature. Or is it a case of actually we want the content creator to have a bit more flexibility in how they deliver our game or product to the audience? And obviously then that's where sort of the more creative elements of influencer marketing come into play and you can have a bit more fun with it. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, horses for courses. People are going to, want to have that control. But I think the best successes are when those barriers are kind of knocked down a little bit and actually give the content creators a bit more flexibility in what they're doing. Yeah,
and like I say, I gave you the heads up that I was going to come to you, Mika, is, for you and your teams, how important is having a degree of control, not control, but, freedom to be creative when it comes to doing this sort of marketing. You only mentioned creativity before and how you have to be more creative in influencer marketing. Can you be more creative when there's not control set down on you?
Yeah, so I think I'd like to kind of, bring this back to different platforms actually. So I think how we communicate with our audience and our players' audience it is fundamentally different when we communicate on Twitter than what we do on Twitch or Instagram or say TikTok, right? So when we might work with the same brand on all of these platforms, it's just the campaigns, what we gonna execute, what are the activations might be very different, or it might not be actually an activation. So on Twitter, and it's very straightforward activation of use this code to get a discount, go to this site, register, and we try to kind of encourage a dialogue with the fans, that they reply, respond, be active there. On Instagram, it's completely different. It might be, it needs to be, usually the stories work pretty well. It's visual stories around, like, you implement the product in a nice, we work back at the days, for example, with Samsung. Samsung was not around like pushing mobile gaming or mobile devices to certain campaigns. It's more about the capability of those devices to take amazing pictures. Our team would be traveling in New York, right? They would just, on their free time, they create pictures. Our content team would be on it, post it, tag relevant parties, etc. So it's really about the channels as well when we use. But I think I'm coming once more back to this kind of being, influencers are real people. I think I hate the comparison between esports and traditional sports. There are certain similarities, there are best practices, but in fundamentally they're different things. But I'd say that one of the strongest elements we have as esports company is that esports professionals on top of the world are role models to young kids or young males who think that, I have the similar, if I have a PC, if I have an internet connection, I can play the same game on the same server. Imagine, can you do that on football? I mean, I want to be the next Ronaldinho, right? Yeah, well, I buy expensive shoes, etc. But you can't imagine, like, it's completely different now. Being online, playing, competitive, games, you can be so much more closer to actual real stars and consider them as that, that kind of influence that these guys can then provide. It's much more concrete on many cases, and I think that's a big achievement that these guys can deliver, and it's a big edge for us as well.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, obviously, no fault of any of us here. The track's obviously running over a little bit, and we are actually coming close to time anyway. So what I wanted to sort of quickly wrap up with before I try and get through a few Q&As is very much if we keep it to sort of like one sentence and kind of like try and force you into an answer to sum up the sort of, focus of the panel is, if I come to you first, Philip, and I will come to everyone, is simply, to answer the question of the panel, do you think influencers are the future of game marketing?
That's tough, putting everybody on the spot asking.
It is. And I mean, and obviously it's going to be a nuanced question, but I think obviously with it being the point of the panel, we should address that directly if we can before we move to Q&A.
I would say yes, in the sense that it enables that direct connection with a target audience.
Yeah.
Compared with some of the other channels and tools that are available. The caveat with that would be my previous point of needing to understand the data of the audience of the influencer. Yeah.
And Amy, do you think this is, I mean, whether we say the future or a part of the future of game marketing, I think both are valid. Do you think this is here to stay, Amy?
I think it's a part of digital marketing overall, but it doesn't replace the other types of performance marketing, etc. But I do think in the influencer marketing, there needs to be more, more options for all types of games and the right kind of people to serve. There needs to be more professionalism in market for them. Because I think one of the comments in the questions, the Q&A you're going to go into, people are asking, every third grade now wants to be an influencer because there's a lot of money in it, right? How do you make that into a sustainable career and not just a one chance thing? And a lot of people we work with in the past, we do it once and we're not happy and then we drop them, right? How do you, the influencer, make sure that your customers are happy with the work that you've done?
Yeah, and Daniel?
Yeah, I actually think it's, it's already established. I think that it's hard now to go onto a social platform or into YouTube or Twitch or wherever that might be and not see a sponsored broadcast or some sort of advertisement that's happening on behalf of an influencer to their communities. So look, I think it's only going to grow, develop, and to Amy's point, I think that it's still relatively young. It will mature. And people will become more professional, and it's already happened at the top, and that obviously will trickle down. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Alwin, before we give the final word to Mika, before I see if I can fit in a question or two.
Can I say no and just leave the panel? No, right? Obviously, it's already a part of the thing, right? It's already here. And I guess, ultimately it's, what everybody said. Just wrap it up. I think it's just like the strategy and your KPI. What do you actually want to achieve? And then how you're going to execute, towards that goal. And I think, even for like, I guess I'll ping Amy, right? And I have kind of like a solution to, what to do. I guess I'll leave it there. I don't want to, get everything into too long. But I mean, like, for a casual brand, for something casual, there's also a way to do it, right? Whereas compared to a hardcore game, then there's a hardcore way to do it. So I think it's a strategy.
Yeah, and Mika?
Yeah, 100%. Like it's already here, right? So I think it's just exactly what Amy said. It's part of the digital marketing. It's already here, and I think 100% also more professionalism is needed across, right? I think. Us working with like pushing those KPIs, etc. We've heard from so many brands when they reach out to us that we are the first team to actually ever ask about those things, right? That people are just not even asking the right questions yet. As an as an influencer, you also need to require it needs to be kind of partnership, right? Than rather like, okay, give me the money, I'll smack your brand somewhere, I talk about something nicely. But it should be like a communication that exactly what I mentioned earlier, that if we can plan things together with the brand, the impact will be much more stronger. And I guess that's what I want to say. It's already here, but there needs to be much more professionalism across the industry.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, and unfortunately, I'm getting word that we are sadly out of time. No, it's not you, David. I'm just, obviously the panels are running over and everything, but I will fit in one question, if that's okay with everyone. Don't feel you need to answer, but if anyone does have an answer, I feel it's great to at least fit in the one question. And then after that, we'll get a link to the Discord down. And if any of you are in the Discord, we'll hopefully give people a chance to reach out to you more and continue conversations. But blending two questions together here, for anyone who's looking to work with smaller influencers, what sort of tips would you give people for vetting channels and working out whether they're the correct fit? And on that point, do you think smaller channels have more freedom in their creativity compared to larger channels, or not? Does anyone have anything they would like to say on this point?
Yeah, do your own homework, right? Unless you don't care about the results, right? If you want, your brand splattered everywhere, which is not what a small studio should do, yeah. Right? Then you need to do your own homework, right? Yeah. Who your competitors are for your product, study who they use, right? And then are those guys a fit of your product, right? Yeah. And then find people or places who are discussing about your product or similar products, right? And see who's actually talking about them, right? And basically do your own homework, right? That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and I think not to take the words out of Philip's mouth, and I am definitely stealing from what you said earlier, but there is obviously strong merit in also thinking about geographical locations, not just the content and the audience, and also the different platforms that they're targeting and who's on those things. Just quickly though, sorry, did someone want to?
I was just going to add to that and say,
yes, it's your answer.
Don't focus on the top line metrics. And actually, this is a conversation I had the other day is, 100,000 followers is great, but is that 100,000 from 3 years ago? Or is that 100,000 from right now and they're all active and they're watching you? Because that will give you a very different result.
That's a very good point. And very quickly, we'll try and keep it as quick as possible, but, I don't want to leave Phil out, is... with over 30% of school children now identifying influencer as a desired career path, does the panel think that the celebrity culture of reality TV is affecting this number? Sort of like, what do you think is contributing to so many people wanting to become influencers?
Yeah,
I know it's a difficult question, but yeah, Dan, it's a whole panel really, isn't it? But
yeah, it's a really interesting sort of to take on it all. I think actually when you sort of like start to really identify what these school children actually want to do, whether that could be they actually want to be a streamer or a content creator or somebody that is an entertainer, then you start to get a bit more into the nuance of actually working out what it is that they want as a career path. I think the term influencer is so broad that that could mean anything to anybody. And I think Phil makes a great point. I think that, yeah, reality TV does affect that for sure, has a knock-on effect as to why people see that as like maybe a quick way to become a celebrity within your own right. But I think when you're looking at it in the context of gaming and content creation, there's actually a lot more professionalism involved in each aspect of that sort of choice and career path, I guess. So, but you're right. I mean, that's a Pandora's box question of you can go into the depths of everything there for sure.
It is a bit, but I think you make a really excellent point, and hopefully if the panel doesn't mind, I think it's actually a really good point to close on, is something that we address throughout, is that, the term influencer is quite broad, which is why, I wanted to start with sort of, a definition, and it's so multifaceted that applies to what everyone on the panel saying have been about doing your research, because the way you might work with, Mika and the esports teams would be completely different to the way that, Alwin might say that you work with micro influencers, to the way that, everyone else is working with different areas, whether it's teams in Saudi Arabia, whether it's Amy working with celebs, working with core, Twitch streamers. So yeah, do your research, but this is something that's here to stay and is obviously vitally important and impactful in the market, not just, I think, for, people who are marketing their games, but for the community of gamers as well, and learning more about, gaming and the community and everything else like that. I just want to say thank you so much to our whole panel. I know we were a little late, but to Mika, Alwin, Dan, Philip, Amy, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experience. It's been an honor to have you.
And Sophia,
thank you.
All Things Indie, thank you for hosting the panel and thanking all our panelists.
Oh, thank you.
It's we have run a bit. The topic was so interesting, and so many people had so much knowledge to impart. I just do a quick hello to Mika and Phil, because I haven't seen them for ages. So good to see you guys, and nice to meet the other people, even though virtually.